Bob Newhart, age 92, Bob Newhart is an expert when it comes to deadpan comedy. He rose to fame in the 60s with his live comedy album, The Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart. Its follow-up album, titled The Button-Down Mind Strikes Back, became equally successful and opened more doors for him. He became an in-demand actor who had memorable performances in The Bob Newhart Show and Newhart. In more recent times, Newhart had a guest role in The Big Bang Theory, and he took home his first and only Primetime Emmy Award. He appeared in a docuseries in 2021 called History of the Sitcom. Bob Newhart's name is synonymous with timeless wit, understated humor, and a career that has spanned over 6 decades. But as we peel back the layers behind the genial deadpan delivery that made him a household name, a question lingers. How does a man in his 90s keep his spirit sharp, his mind agile, and his presence so vital in a world obsessed with youth and reinvention? At first glance, Bob's vitality seems like a mystery wrapped in simple charm. Yet, behind the scenes, there is a story few know. One that reveals a raw, sometimes uncomfortable struggle against the inevitable decay of age, and a fierce, almost rebellious will to keep living on his own terms. It began quietly in the early 2000s. Bob, who had enjoyed decades of success, found himself grappling with what he calls the silence of invisibility. Offers dried up, younger stars took center stage, and the industry that once revered him seemed ready to move on. "I was at a crossroads," Bob recalls. "It felt like the world had said, 'Thanks, you're done now.' That's a bitter pill." But the bitterness was just the beginning. What followed was a private battle that Bob never broadcasted, a battle with loneliness and the creeping shadows of self-doubt. "I started to wonder if my jokes mattered anymore, if my voice could still cut through the noise," he confesses. "It was scary. You don't think about it when you're young, but when the spotlight fades, you have to face yourself." Many might have retreated, but Bob chose to fight back, not by chasing fame or reinvention, but by redefining what vitality meant to him. In a move that surprised even close friends, Bob took up meditation, something he had scoffed at for years. "I thought it was hippie nonsense," he admits with a chuckle, "but it turned out to be the lifeline I didn't know I needed." Meditation was only part of it. Bob adopted a minimalist lifestyle, stripping away distractions and focusing on presence. Presence in his relationships, his health, and his craft. He became vigilant about his mental and physical well-being, walking daily, eating mindfully, and keeping a strict regimen to maintain his sharpness. Yet the most profound change was not physical. It was the acceptance of vulnerability. In interviews and conversations, Bob began sharing his fears and doubts openly, allowing audiences to see the man behind the deadpan facade. This raw honesty forged a deeper connection with fans, especially those in the 40-plus age group who themselves wrestle with aging and relevance. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. In 2018, Bob was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's disease, a secret he kept hidden for years. The diagnosis hit like a thunderclap, a cruel irony for a man whose career thrived on precision, timing, and control. "I thought it was the end," he admits. "The thing I feared most was losing my mind, my ability to perform, to communicate. Parkinson's threatened all that." Rather than succumb, Bob used the diagnosis as a catalyst. He threw himself into research, therapy, and advocacy. He became a vocal supporter of neurological health awareness, opening a new chapter of purpose beyond comedy. Yet the conflict deepened. Friends and family urged him to slow down, to step back and enjoy retirement. But Bob resisted fiercely. "I'm not done," he would say, voice resolute. "If I bow out now, I'm letting the disease win." This determination led Bob to a surprise collaboration, a one-man show that combined humor, personal story, and raw emotion. It was unlike anything he had done before, a theatrical memoir that walked audiences through his battles, his fears, and ultimately his hope. The show's opening night was tense. Bob battled tremors and anxiety backstage, doubting his own ability. But once on stage, something remarkable happened. The audience wasn't just watching a comedy legend. They were witnessing a man's defiant stand against time itself. The performance earned rave reviews and rekindled Bob's career in an unexpected way, attracting a younger, more diverse audience. Critics called it a masterclass in vulnerability and resilience. Bob's story is not just one of laughter, but of courage. It reveals a universal truth. Vitality is less about age and more about attitude, less about physical perfection and more about embracing imperfection. As Bob puts it, I'm 92, yes, but every day I wake up, I choose to fight, to laugh, and to be present. That's the secret. Not to pretend I'm immortal, but to live as if today is a gift. The story closes with Bob reflecting on a simple but powerful moment, sitting quietly in his garden, sunlight filtering through the leaves, feeling the weight of decades, but also the lightness of being alive. For me, vitality isn't a race to stay young. It's the courage to face whatever comes, with honesty, humor, and a little bit of stubbornness. And in that stubbornness, Bob Newhart has found his greatest strength. A legacy not just of comedy, but of relentless life. The years following Bob Newhart's quiet diagnosis marked a turning point, not just in his life, but in the narrative of aging, resilience, and public perception of vitality. What had seemed like a personal battle suddenly became a broader statement about defying expectations and reclaiming purpose in the face of loss. Bob's decision to create his one-man show was bold. Many thought it a reckless gamble for a man in his 90s, grappling with a disease that slowly steals control. The stakes were high. If he failed, it could mean not only the loss of his voice, but also a final retreat from the world that had once celebrated him. But it was this very vulnerability that made the project electrifying. Rehearsals were grueling. Tremors crept in at the worst moments. There were days when the lines slipped away, or when exhaustion forced him to stop. Yet each time, Bob dug deeper. His stubbornness was no longer just a personal quirk. It was a lifeline, a declaration that the fight was far from over. During these rehearsals, tensions rose, not only within Bob, but between him and those closest to him. His wife, longtime partner, and anchor through decades, begged him to reconsider. "You don't have to prove anything anymore," she told him one evening, tears in her eyes. "We just want you to be well." Bob's response was unwavering, tinged with a mix of desperation and defiance. "If I stop, I'm done. And I'm not ready for that. Not yet." This clash illuminated the core of Bob's struggle, the tension between acceptance and resistance, between embracing frailty and fighting to remain vital. It was a conflict many in their 40s and beyond would recognize all too well. But there was another, more unexpected source of tension. As Bob's public openness about his Parkinson's diagnosis grew, so did the backlash from a surprising quarter: the entertainment industry itself. Some producers and networks, wary of what they perceived as a decline, began to question whether Bob was still marketable. "They see you as fragile, not funny," a close friend confided. For a man whose career had been built on subtlety, this blunt dismissal was a bitter pill. It fueled Bob's resolve, but also exposed a deep hypocrisy. Here was a culture obsessed with youth and perfection, yet praising authenticity, until it got too real. This industry resistance nearly derailed Bob's show. Invitations to perform were rescinded. Press opportunities vanished. It felt like the world was trying to put him out to pasture, not because of talent or relevance, but because of age and illness. Yet Bob's supporters rallied. Fans, longtime colleagues, and new audiences united, turning social media into a platform of advocacy and celebration. Hashtags like #JuckerBobStrong and Never Too Old trended, shining a light on ageism and inspiring conversations about dignity and visibility in later life. The premiere night arrived under a spotlight heavy with expectation. The theatre buzzed, a mix of longtime admirers, curious critics, and younger viewers unfamiliar with Bob's legacy, but drawn to the story of resilience. Backstage, Bob's hands trembled as he adjusted his microphone. The familiar stage lights felt colder, more merciless. But when he stepped out, the room fell into a hush. What followed was a masterful blend of humor and heartache, laughter and tears. Bob shared stories from his youth, his first failed attempts at stand-up, the thrill of his breakout album, but also his raw battle with Parkinson's, the moments of doubt, and the fierce love that kept him going. At one point, he paused, voice cracking. "I may shake, I may falter, but I am still here, still me, still fighting." The audience erupted, not just in applause, but in shared emotion. This was not just entertainment, it was a communion. Critics were stunned. Reviews praised the show as a raw, unfiltered exploration of aging and humanity, and a reminder that the human spirit can shine brightest in the darkest times. Yet amid this acclaim, Bob revealed something even more profound. A secret hope that this show was not an end, but a beginning. "I want people to see that life doesn't stop. It changes, and sometimes that change is where you find your true strength." Behind the curtain, this marked a personal victory over the whispers of obsolescence. It was a rebuke to the industry's ageism, a declaration that humor, wisdom, and vitality can, and must, transcend years and diagnoses. Bob's journey had come full circle. From a young man who rose to fame with a simple joke, to a nonagenarian who turned vulnerability into power, he embodied a narrative of relentless courage. The emotional climax came not just from Bob's story, but from the broader challenge it posed to society. How do we honor the aging, embrace imperfection, and redefine what it means to live fully, at every age? Bob's answer is clear. It's not about denying the realities of aging or illness. It's about choosing daily to stand, to speak, and to laugh, even when the world suggests you should be silent. As the curtain falls on his show, Bob's voice echoes beyond the theatre. We are all works in progress, no matter the years behind us. Vitality is not a number. It's a choice. And with that choice, Bob Newhart has not only reclaimed his own vitality, but has sparked a movement. One that challenges us all to rethink age, purpose, and the power of living boldly. Bob Newhart's journey from a sharp-witted comedian in the 60s to a vulnerable yet resilient figure in his 90s is more than a story of career longevity. It's a profound meditation on the human spirit's capacity to endure, adapt, and thrive amid life's toughest challenges. The curtain has fallen on his groundbreaking one-man show, but the impact lingers. Audiences, critics, and peers alike are left grappling with a new image of what it means to age with dignity and vitality. Bob has shattered the conventional narrative that aging equals decline, invisibility, and silence, and replaced it with something far more courageous, a narrative of choice, defiance, and relentless presence. Bob himself reflects on this transformation with humility and clarity. "I never wanted to be a poster child for Parkinson's or aging," he confesses, "but I realized I could either hide or embrace it. I chose to embrace, because if my story helps even one person see that life doesn't end at 90, then it's worth it." His vulnerability on stage, sharing raw moments of fear, doubt, and frustration, forged a deeper bond with his audience than decades of punchlines ever could. It reminded everyone that behind every public persona is a complex, often fragile human being. For those watching from their own crossroads, whether facing illness, loss, or the quiet desperation that can come with middle age and beyond, Bob's story is a beacon. It says loud and clear, you are not alone, and your life still matters immensely. But this conclusion is not simply about one man's defiance of age and illness. It raises uncomfortable but necessary questions about society's relationship with aging, visibility, and value. Why do we so often equate vitality with youth? Why do industries discard talent the moment it no longer fits a narrow image? And most importantly, how can we cultivate a culture that celebrates every stage of life, honoring wisdom alongside innovation? Bob's experience exposes this tension, challenging viewers to confront their own biases and fears about aging. His story compels a reassessment of what it truly means to live fully. In the final act of his show, Bob delivers a simple yet profound message. We all have our battles, some visible, some hidden. But what makes us truly alive is the fight to keep going, to keep laughing, and to keep loving, no matter the hand we're dealt. It's this message that resonates deeply with a generation increasingly aware that longevity is not guaranteed, but the quality of life, the vitality of spirit, can be cultivated through choice, courage, and connection. Behind the scenes, Bob's life has taken on new rhythms. He spends mornings in meditation and movement, afternoons with his wife and close friends, and evenings writing new material, always searching for the next way to connect, to make people laugh, to offer hope. His advocacy has grown too. Bob now speaks openly at neurological health conferences and participates in campaigns fighting ageism and disability stigma in entertainment and beyond. His efforts have inspired not only fans but fellow artists who had resigned themselves to quiet exits. Yet, despite the accolades and renewed relevance, Bob remains grounded. "I'm just a guy who's lucky to still be here," he says, eyes twinkling with that signature deadpan charm. "Every day is a gift, even the shaky ones." This blend of humor and honesty is Bob's ultimate legacy. He teaches that vitality is not a physical state alone, but a mindset, one that embraces imperfection, confronts fear, and cherishes connection. For his audience, this lesson is transformative. It sparks conversations about caregiving, mental health, and community support, inviting viewers to look beyond the superficial markers of success to what truly nourishes the human spirit. Bob's story also redefines what success means in later life. It's not about awards or headlines, but about authenticity, purpose, and leaving a mark that transcends fleeting fame. In the years to come, Bob Newhart's journey will likely be remembered not just for his iconic comedy, but for his brave embrace of vulnerability and refusal to be silenced. As the final scene of this story unfolds, imagine Bob in his garden once more. The same place where he found solace in stillness and strength in simplicity. The golden light filters through the trees, casting gentle shadows on his weathered face. There is peace here, but also an undeniable spark. The spark of a man who has lived fully, fought fiercely, and laughed unrelentingly. His legacy is a call to action for all of us, to choose vitality, to face our fears honestly, and to cherish the precious, unpredictable journey of life. Every tremor, every triumph, every laugh along the way. And as the screen fades to black, Bob's voice echoes one last time. Age isn't the enemy, it's just the road we travel. What matters is how we walk it, with courage, humor, and a little bit of stubbornness, because that's how we stay alive.